Hello there, I'm Kaz. You know, there's this common misconception that the Japanese role-playing game has or is going to make a comeback, mainly due to the notion that JRPGs aren't being made as much as they used to be in the late 90s and early 2000s. No. The genre that hasn't been produced as much since then is the tactical RPG. The tactical RPG, a unique blend of the methodical mechanics of turn-based strategy and the depth and text-heavy storytelling found in role-playing games. It's one of the oldest and most storied genres in all of gaming, with classics such as Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together, Final Fantasy Tactics, and of course, the ever-popular Fire Emblem. Sadly, this mixture of strategy and role-playing has seen much better days, with new IP in the genre becoming more and more uncommon, and fresh entries in classic series being rarer still. Not counting remakes, Final Fantasy Tactics hasn't seen a new game since A2 on the DS in 2008, and Tactics Ogre has remained untouched since 2002. Even Fire Emblem, the series which popularized strategic role-playing games, was on the wane until Awakening's unexpected success. That's not to say that there aren't any new strategy RPGs being made, of course. Nintendo did recently announce a new Fire Emblem game, and Stoics The Banner Saga is an excellent new series whose second game is coming out later this year, but compared to the amount of retro platformers and shoot-'em-ups being made in the indie scene, or the first-person shooters in AAA, its presence has diminished considerably in the 21st century. Enter Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters, the newest entry in the genre, released on the PlayStation Vita and PlayStation 3 on March 10th, 2015, localized by Aksys Games and made by Toybox Inc, a developer who is next to impossible to find anything about. There's at least 3 different companies who operate under the name Toybox, one of which is a New Brunswick video game company founded in 1999. But that's not the one we're talking about today. This Toybox comes to us from Tokyo, Japan, being founded in 2011. They're a fairly new studio with only 2 titles to their name prior to Tokyo Twilight, being responsible for the director's cut of Deadly Premonition and the critically panned 3DS game Hometown Story. So, is Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters a terrifyingly terrific title? Or is this ghoulish game in need of some serious busting? Let's find out. Since we're taking a look at another text-heavy title, and frankly I'm still trying to set up my Vita TV for recording purposes, the footage for this review will be from the Japanese version. The story opens as you, a transfer student named Ryusuke, moves to Tokyo to begin your secondary school years. And what a convenient time your move happens to be, as ghosts have started to pop up and attack civilians, and you just so happen to be able to see and exorcise them. After discovering your newfound powers, you join up with Gatekeepers, an occult magazine publisher who secretly exorcises ghosts to keep the city safe from paranormal activity, all while attending a high school whose past may be connected to the mysterious suicide of a female student. Why are all these ghosts appearing in Tokyo and what's causing them to attack people? What happened to that mysterious girl and how is it connected to the school?
How will we defeat the evil? Why am I asking you all these questions?
All of this and more are never answered. Tokyo Twilight constantly raises new questions with no desire to answer them. That's without getting into the bizarre controls that this tale entails. For some reason, the game chose the R button to continue on to the next line of dialogue rather than one of the face buttons. I get what they're going for. It's like flipping through the pages of a novel, right to left, left to right. But then why does the select button recap everything you just read? If anything, it should be the L button for that function, which would have aided the whole reading a book motif that the game has going for it. It's especially annoying because the game's constant and meaningless choices and holding the D-pad in a specific direction. But we'll come back to this in a moment. Most of the problems involved with these inquiries can be attributed to the episodic nature of the title. Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters takes a more episodic approach to storytelling, which explains why each individual chapter is more focused on raising questions than answering them. It doesn't excuse the fact that later chapters constantly ignore or fail to resolve them, but it does explain where the problem originates from. What it doesn't explain is the need to show off its intro and end credits every single time a chapter begins and ends. It feels like this game is a compilation of some episodic download released over several weeks, but as far as my knowledge goes, this game came out as a single release. It's like Resident Evil Revelations, where they just decided to recap the last chapter that you just finished playing. It's redundant and just ends up wasting time. But at the very least, the story in Revelations is coherent. It's silly, sure, it's Resident Evil after all, but at the very least the episodes do connect to one another, and the conclusion resolves most of the ongoing plot threads. Again, it's silly, but the story is complete. In Tokyo Twilight, the episodic structure is so disjointed that it renders the story nearly incoherent, as almost none of the episodes contribute to the overarching narrative. This wouldn't be as big a problem if the episodes were at least well written, but unfortunately, the problems with the story can't be blamed solely on its structure, disconnected as it may be. They're incredibly dull and formulaic. There's something strange in your neighborhood, so who you gonna call? I wish. At least that might have been funny. While there were a few times where I smiled from some of the jokes, there weren't any particularly humorous moments, mostly because what little humor exists is either formed from tired anime cliches or the dialogue choices that affect neither the plot nor the game itself. The tone is all over the place, where one will have a character monologue about their past life, while another has you visit a guitarist's grave whose tombstone is shaped like a guitar and features a song written on said grave. It's a little unbalanced is what I'm saying. It's also not translated very well, with quite a few spelling and grammatical errors throughout this wordy adventure. Then again, any localization that thinks using the word pleb is acceptable should probably have been edited, 3 more times, 4 just to be safe. It's rather unusual for Aksys Games, who tend to do an excellent job in translating text-heavy adventures such as these. The episodes are also pretty short, with each of them being roughly 30 to 60 minutes, which leaves very little time for developing the main characters along with the rest of the events that happen within it. As a result, a lot of the writing is exposition for the player, with no regard for developing the characters you interact with, as each chapter ends with some pretentious narration about life after death and how wonderful it is to be alive. Also, this is a nitpick, but every chapter ends with the character's dialogue unskippable and slower than normal. It's Fire Emblem's final chapter all over again. You know, minus the closure. Speaking of the characters, and putting aside my distaste for silent protagonists, the cast is nothing but walking tropes. The wimpy geek, the guitar-loving rockhead, the businesswoman who only cares for money, the bubbly schoolgirl, and so on. I'll give credit for featuring one of the better depictions of a disabled person in a game, namely since there's so few of them to begin with, but any praise that can be given for the only decent character is quickly withdrawn for having one of those stereotypical portrayals of 2 homosexual men I've seen in any medium, let alone in video games. Not that it matters, the entire cast is completely static, as Tokyo Twilight continues telling the player how the characters feel, with no development or growth for them or the relationships they share with one another throughout the entire adventure. And before you ask, no, the choices you make don't change or shape the characters in any way. You might see a different line of dialogue, but said dialogue is inconsequential to the overarching narrative or the relationship between the player and the characters. At best, we are told something new about a character rather than said character growing as a result of their actions. It's yet another example of a story that doesn't understand the meaning of show, don't tell. And that's especially disappointing here because what we do see of these characters are some very lovely animations. Being told a character's traits doesn't further them or the relationships with the character, nor does it mean they have personality. It's just giving the player a description. Knowing a character likes turtles or used to work in the government tells me nothing about who they are, and any opportunity to capitalize on making what we do know about them meaningful is completely squandered thanks to this episodic structure. It doesn't help that the game keeps introducing new characters and fails to develop any of them, instead cramming in as many subplots as possible, none of which have any bearing on the actual plot. Almost nothing plot relevant happens until the final chapter, which concludes with an abrupt ending that offers no resolution or closure for the cast or most of the plot points it introduced. It just stops right after introducing yet another plot point, then credits roll, and post-credit plot twist. The end! Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters tells a terrible story with characters whose only memorable traits come from some astounding artwork. One would hope the gameplay would redeem its reprehensible story, but Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters is a tactical RPG with an affinity for one of the genre's most divisive mechanics, Fog of War. For those unfamiliar with the phrase, Fog of War is a real-life term coined in the 19th century, usually used to describe a lack of information in a given military strategy. When it comes to video games, the term usually refers to when the player can't see the entire map in a tactical RPG, thus being uncertain as to the opponent's position and needing to smartly consider how best to spend their turn. I know a lot of people don't like Fog of War and understand the reason why it's not looked upon favorably, but I personally don't mind when it's used to vary the gameplay and find that, when done right, it can lead to some very tense moments given the right map design. However, when every map uses it, it becomes a very tiresome exercise in trial and error. It's possible that you can have every map feature Fog of War and be a masterpiece of strategic gameplay, but that certainly isn't the case in Tokyo Twilight, whose main problem arises from how each turn functions. Unlike almost every single tactical RPG out there, which features either a unit-by-unit system or ally and enemy phases, every single unit on the map moves and acts at once in the same turn. Every action takes up a certain amount of action points, here called AP, ranging from skills and movements to the mere act of turning left or right. The higher your AP, the farther you can move and better actions you can perform. As creative as this system may be on paper, in execution, it makes for some of the most tedious turns in any tactics title, as you constantly search around in the dark until you actually find a ghost, assuming you have any AP left to attack.
If you have the misfortune of bumping into a ghost, they get a free hit on you with no possibility for a counterattack. Since ghosts can pass through obstacles you can't, expect more than a couple moments of frustration as a ghost flees from an attack and into the darkness, and that's assuming that your party is even equipped with an item that lets them see in the dark. Without one, it's a guessing game as to where the ghosts are hiding and where they're moving to. It's like Battleship, except your attacks keep missing because your opponent keeps moving around their ships. In fairness, most of your allies do have attacks that cover a large range, and what ghouls you do see have their possible movement displayed, but it doesn't change the fact that you're taking a chance on a possible panel that they may end up on. And since every ghost can pass through obstacles you can't or even teleport to the other side of the map, it makes the limited AP early in the game a severe pain. Though you do recover AP every turn, you can't accumulate it, which is disappointing. It would have been a lot more interesting if you could accumulate AP over time and unleash more powerful attacks on your opponents. As is, there's no point in conserving your points considering that very few skills are useful outside of the ones which increase attack and defense. But that's the least of your worries. Every single ghost hunt has a turn limit. If you fail to finish off the enemy in the turn limit, you'll have to do it all over again. There is nothing more frustrating than having one turn left with your target at low health and losing because you couldn't see where your target could be moving to because they ran off in the dark the turn prior. There's a reason why most Fog of War encounters don't have time limits. Adding a time limit adds a level of urgency that goes against the more careful and methodical nature when dealing with Fog of War, forcing you to be more reckless in searching for your target. There's too much uncertainty in not knowing where your opponent is to afford sending in units to take a stab in the dark, mainly because in Tokyo Twilight, if there's nothing there, you run the risk of destroying some object which you have to pay for if you attack, which affects how well or not you're ranked. Now if you were to change it to, say, a person placed that the player needs to defend for a certain amount of turns, that can work, but variety is yet another feature that Tokyo Twilight lacks. There is a ghost that needs to be defeated, so you defeat it in under the time limit. That's it. You might have other ghosts in the fray which can net you some extra experience, but the mission ends every time when you beat a specific ghost. But it's not just limited in terms of missions, it's also restricted in terms of deployment. The game features a schedule system that limits which party members can be used for each chapter. Not that it matters, since every single chapter features a guest character or two, most of whom don't even become permanent party members and can't be equipped before setting out, and you're required to bring in 2 characters every single time, which artificially inflates the difficulty by limiting what the player can do. It's also rather annoying how you can't shoot party equipment once you've accepted the mission and gone to the map screen. It's only doable at the locker, which is completely arbitrary. Let the player easily prepare themselves for an upcoming mission while they see what map they're going to be on and what unit would be best suited to fight on it. On the subject of equipment, good luck grabbing new weapons. The store never restocks on them for your party. The only way to get new weapons for your team members is to spend points leveling up their individual skills and hope you're lucky enough to be handed a better weapon than the one they're currently wielding, which is beyond infuriating. That's Tokyo Twilight in a word. Luck. There is no difficulty curve whatsoever. There are difficulty spikes, mainly during the chapters where half of your party doesn't have any equipment and is extremely vulnerable, but overall, there is zero strategy to be found in these encounters. It's all a matter of luck in finding out where your opponent is hiding, then surrounding them with all your party members and attacking them in the vain hope that they don't run away. The final chapter in particular stands out for finding a way to render its own gimmick pointless, while still managing to preserve the rest of the tedium in every minute of these insipid time trials. There certainly isn't any challenge that comes from the AI, which comes in 2 flavors, standing still and being wailed on from a distance, or running into the darkness to never be found again. At the end of each mission, you're provided a rundown on how well you did, giving bonuses to your pay minus expenses for conditions and destroyed property, and then given a rank. Said rank will almost always be the highest of them all, an S rank because the game doesn't judge based on your tactics, but rather on how much money you make. Money which, I might add, becomes pointless since there's nothing to spend it on. Healing items and new equipment are relatively cheap since, as I said earlier, the amount of available party members that require gear is minimal, and not a single weapon can be purchased for anyone to equip aside from yourself. If there is one thing Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters does right, it's the animation. It is gorgeous looking. It is weird that only one character is on the screen when there's clearly room for 2 or more depending on whether or not they overlap them. The animation itself is a little simplistic, and the enemy design is lacking, but credit where credit is due, the artwork for friend and foe alike look really good. They're so well drawn that it makes you wonder why the majority of the backgrounds are photos. And I don't mean they look photorealistic, I mean they actually took pictures of different environments and put them in as the background. They aren't exactly impressive pictures either, with a lot of blurred photos of rooms and roads. Contrast them with the well-done character motions, they're beyond an eyesore. It's an incredibly baffling decision when you consider that the Gatekeeper's base is an original piece and a very well-rendered one at that. Well, okay, most of the pictures look bad. The ones during the end credits look fine, though I can't imagine why you'd want to see the same pictures 13 times. This game loves to recycle the same cutscenes over and over again, especially Shiga opening up his laptop. In fact, in one moment, they actually reused this very same scene twice. Then again, at least these cutscenes are visually interesting, unlike the map. Look, this eagle-eye view of the map is almost never impressive in a tactical RPG. But even then, this is downright lazy. It's just circles and squares whose only distinction comes from basic symbols or colors. There's nothing appealing about it. It's the bare minimum for what qualifies as a map. Thankfully, the battle screen is a little more dynamic, as the camera zooms into the character's perspective, which almost gives it this found footage feeling, as fists and flame come straight towards the camera, the lens breaking from the attack. As for the sound, the voice acting is minimal and limited to Japanese audio only, making it hard to say how good the performances are when I don't understand the language they're saying. The music is full of generic rock tunes and forgettable J-pop. Aside from the somewhat cheesy opening theme Shoot That Crimson Sky, you're better off just muting the music and turning up your own tunes. Who exactly arranged this song? Really? Nobuo Uematsu. The Nobuo Uematsu who worked on Final Fantasy VI. Composed this? Never would have guessed. You know, it's funny that the music is so bland when most of the episode have a title that references an all-time great rock and roll song like Stairway to Heaven, House of the Rising Sun, Little Wing, etc. If only the game was half as good as the tunes it's referring to.
In a year that the grandfather of the tactical RPG celebrates its 25th anniversary and Aksys Games' 10th, Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters is a terribly disappointing title on both fronts.
As a tactical RPG, Tokyo Twilight was an incredibly frustrating entry to get through, a brainless bore whose gimmick fails to hide the stark lack of challenge and monotonous missions. Its story is incoherent and badly translated, and its wonderful artwork is wasted on horrendous backgrounds and a banal plot with a cavalcade of cliché characters.
If you're looking for the next must-have tactical RPG, this isn't it. At all. If you're looking to celebrate Aksys Games' 10th anniversary, you're better off with Mind Zero or Zero Escape. Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters earns a 3.5 out of 10. That's all for now, folks. Until next time, game on, my friends.